Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Roney. Welcome to tonight's cancer conversation. Before we get started, as you all know, I like to take the opportunity to go through a couple things, especially if you're new to the cancer conversation. If you've been here before, always welcome back. And then if you're new to the cancer conversation, I want to walk you through our 4-pillar plan. I think it's really important to understand exactly what we do. Forget about us for a second. In general, what a good plan looks like. You could follow to make sure you're dotting I's and crossing T's, and how we can help in the clinic facilitate that. So I'll talk about that briefly, and then I want to talk about our wellness plan. So one of the things that we've worked on in 2024, or was a major goal, is the prevention part. So what we're seeing in the world today, right, in this chronic disease world, especially with cancer, which I personally consider it a symptom, right? But this world, we're seeing just an overwhelming amount of, whether it's toxins or chemicals or what they call an antigenic load on the body, which could be viral loads or bacterial loads or candida or fungal infections, parasites, heavy metals, toxins, chemicals, etc., right? There's this overwhelming amount of those and that burden on the human body, which then causes weakness of the immune system. It causes inflammation, which then leads to what they call oxidative stress and damage to the cells, and then that eventually leads to cancer. Now, I left a lot out of that, but the point I'm making is, because of what we're seeing today, we're doing a very, very strong push of educating on prevention. So I want to go over the preventative program that we put into place that you all can take advantage of, and we're really trying to get that message out. And we consider it, whether it's working with prevention or working with a cancer patient that is actively fighting cancer, and or somebody that's working on preventing reoccurrence. A lot of the, I would say, the modalities and the plan and the structure is very similar, because the same things that we have to work to clean up are the same things that can prevent cancer as well. So same with reoccurrence. So I'll walk you through that. So without further ado, let me go over the 4 pillars, because I think that's very, very important. The feedback that I get consistently is they love being here. Number one, because we have so many things under one roof, a lot of tools in the toolbox, and we have very experienced doctors in this functional oncology world. But we also have a very, very strict plan. And that plan, it revolves around this 4-pillar approach. So let me explain. The first pillar of the 4-pillar approach is testing. So we'll do cancer testing, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but we also do cause testing. So when we talk about, a comparison, conventional versus this integrative model that we implement, the conventional world has their set guidelines on, we'll do these tests and maybe these scans, etc. What we want to do is get deeper. And what I mean by that is we want to test things like circulating tumor cell activity or circulating tumor cell DNA. So we'll use tests like the RGCC test that's sent to Greece. We'll use tests like the Guardant 360 test, etc. There's a lot of labs now that do these circulating tumor cell tests. The relevance, and comparative to the conventional model, the relevance of those tests is that if we have these circulating tumor cells, which are cells that basically break off the original tumor and are circulating around the blood, if we have them in our system and we're not dealing with them, reoccurrence rates are higher. So it increases the chances of reoccurrence if they're not either tested, identified, and or they're not brought down. And there's specific plans and protocols that we use to bring those circulating tumor cells down. So again, if we're doing a comparison, if the conventional model does their treatment and you end up with no evidence of disease, but these circulating tumor cells were never tested and or brought down, then your chance of reoccurrence is much, much higher. So that's just one test in many that we're going to do in addition to, say, scans like ultrasounds or MRIs or CAT scans or PET scans and things like that. We also want to look at an enzyme as an example called nagalase. Nagalase is an enzyme that's secreted by the cancer cells that if it's elevated, it's actually blocking our immune system from identifying and attacking the cancer cell. So it's a self-defense mechanism by the cancer cell, okay? So we want to use that not only to identify if it's elevated so we can bring it down, which thereby gives your immune system a better chance to find and attack the cancer cell, but we use that as a surveillance tool as well. And I'll talk about that in a minute. There's an enzyme called PHI that we also look at. That tells us a lot. However, we really look at it to see if your cells are now low oxygen, right? So cancer cells, and we've done this on previous conversations, go from using respiration to what they call anaerobic respiration or low oxygen. And they actually use fermentation. So they ferment glucose and they ferment glutamine. So we want to know if your cells are doing that, right? And it's a hallmark of cancer. So we actually anticipate seeing that being elevated. And if it is, we get more aggressive on techniques or modalities like hyperbaric or the CVAC that we have here, ozone therapies, things like that that are going to increase oxygenation of the cell. There's also tumor markers that we use. If it's breast, we'll use 15-3, 27-29. We'll use 19-9 and CA125s for, say, ovarian and colorectal, etc. So we're basically taking what they're doing here conventionally and looking in a lot more detail and depth to not only be able to help you today, but also use those as surveillance tools moving forward so we can identify if there are things that are creeping up, if you will, way before a scan will pick it up. It gives you an idea of some of the testing in our pillar 1. Also, which I'll get to in a second, we also want to look at causes. So one of the things in the conventional model, if we're comparing and contrasting, and let me just say this, we thoroughly respect the conventional model of what they can do for you, right? However, it's one chapter of maybe a 10-chapter book. So it's always important to understand these other 9 chapters of the book to be able to help you in the most relevant and highest level that we can. So using those other 9 chapters is a big part of this. So the testing, again, going back to causes, the conventional model doesn't look at causes. They just try to kill what's there. And if it logically, speaking, if you will, trying to identify what the heck caused cancer, because it doesn't just happen. It's not just a thing. It actually has some causes there. So we go through that list, which I'll touch base on in a second. So that gives you the testing on the cancer side and the cause side. All right, pillar 2 is starving the cancer and killing the cancer. So starving it could be things like the ketogenic diet, for example. We know that cancer cells feed on glucose and glutamine. So we had a cancer conversation not too long ago with Dr. Siegfried, who's in the lab doing a lot of this research, showing that if we really press on the glucose and knock it down using, say, the ketogenic diet, getting into therapeutic range of lowering that glucose and more ketones, cancer cells don't feed on ketones or can't. So that's a big benefit. And then knocking the glutamine down or pulsing that at times, we can starve the cancer cell. And he's doing that research and we're following that. And then the other part is we can use repurposed medications to be able to help block some of the pathways that actually feed the cancer cells as well. So that's the starve part. And then the kill part would include things like chemo, surgery, radiation, immunotherapies. Here we do low dose chemo. It could also include some natural remedies like high dose vitamin C, hyperthermia, etc. So the kill phase is kind of the bomb, if you will, or the atomic bomb. And I will tell you, personally speaking, from what I see, most patients that come here are going to need a little bit of that, right? And then a lot of this, or a lot of this and a lot of this, right? We need both models and to marry them and integrate to give you the best chance for long-term care. So the point I'll make with that is starving and killing are a very big part of this 4-pillar approach, and then figuring out what to do in that second pillar of the kill phase is a big part of the overall plan. Okay, pillar 3 has to do with the cell. So there's hallmarks of cancer, okay? One of them is a weakened immune system. Most likely the immune system becomes weak because it's diluted. And what I mean by that, it's fighting too many things. It would be like me fighting 5 people at one time. I can only do so much with that So hypothetically, say I have infections, viral loads, bacterial loads, I have heavy metals, I have toxins, etc. My immune system is trying to battle all those, which is going to cause it to become deficient, right? Dysregulated, weakened. And that's a hallmark of cancer. So two parts of the equation. We want to get rid of those, which I'll talk about in a second related to causes, but we also want to stimulate the immune system right away. So that's why we use high dose vitamin C, we'll use mistletoe, we'll use artesunate, we'll use these things that are going to get your immune system cranking right away because it's a hallmark of cancer, okay? In addition, in this pillar 3, we know a hallmark of cancer, and I already mentioned it, is low oxygen, okay? So when a cell becomes hypoxic or low oxygen environment, it also creates an environment where cancer and microbes, microorganisms can thrive. So we want to use modalities that can increase oxygen right away. And I mentioned things like hyperbaric, ozone treatments, CVAC that we have here are all designed to increase oxygen. When we get low oxygen, right, we also get high acidity, just like working out. If I worked out too hard, the next day I get tight and sore. That's from lactic acid buildup due to low oxygen situations. Cancer cells, low oxygen, so a hallmark is high acidity. So we want to identify that and we want to bring that down. A fourth pillar, hallmark of cancer, is the cell energy or polarity starts to drop. Dr. Tennant's research clearly shows that these cells function at a high level at minus 25 millivolts. And when we test this via our Mead testing, we show that the energy of the cell is a lot less. And so we need to increase. We can do that with biocharger, with a biomodulator, grounding. If you have ever heard people grounding, that's why they ground, to increase the charge of that cell. And that cell being charged up functions much, much better, okay? The final hallmark is that the nutrition level within the cell, which is why we use something called oligoscan, the nutrition level within the cell and the trace minerals are typically very depleted. So we want to find out if they are. And then the other thing that we could see is if things like heavy metals are blocking the absorption of those trace minerals. And thereby we could start creating a better nutritional foundation for the cell. So if we boost the immune system, get better oxygen, decrease acidity, increase voltage, increase the nutrition level of the cell, all of a sudden we make it less conducive for cancer. So that's a big, big factor in this 4-pillar approach that really shouldn't be missed, okay? All right, finally, the 4th pillar are those causes, right? Things like bacterial pathogens, like bacteria, viruses, fungal infections, parasites. They're the main 4 pathogens. And then you have things like environmental toxins, your non-metal toxins like herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, things like that. You have your heavy metals, your mercuries, your leads, things like that. And then you also have mycotoxins from mold exposure. That's becoming more and more prevalent in today's world as well. So, and then the causes also include metabolic dysfunction. What about dysregulated blood sugar? What about thyroid? What about anemia? What about, EMFs, right? They're a big part today that we have to look at. Sleep and water intake and diet. I mean, that list goes on, but you get the idea that we have to look at those, because what happens is if I have a high load of any of those, my immune system is going to continually overwork trying to deal with that foreign invader. That overworked immune system is going to constantly create chemokines, cytokines, these inflammatory proteins or agents, right? That inflammation at the cellular level is then going to cause what they call oxidative stress. The oxidative stress is what damages the cell, okay? And there's things like DNA and genomes of the cell that take the cell through cell death called apoptosis. If those are damaged, right? So older damaged cells should die off. Naturally, it's called programmed cell death. But if the DNA and the genomes are damaged from a lot of this inflammation and oxidative stress, those cells no longer go through programmed cell death. The older damaged cells start to replicate out of control. That's cancer. Now I'm skipping a lot of steps, but that just gives you an idea that we want to change the cellular environment around, but also we want to work up the chain of events and get rid of why that damage has occurred. And that entails the causes, or pillar 4. So that gives you a good overview of pillar 1, 2, 3, and 4. And here at the clinic, our job is to make sure that every I is dotted and T is crossed as it relates to those 4 pillars. The number one thing that's going to do for you as a patient going through this is decrease your downside significantly and significantly increase your upside. And that's the best we can do. Great plan, attention to detail, I's dotted, T's crossed, and then you have less of a downside and significantly more upside. It's the best you can do, okay? The other thing it does is it creates confidence where you're now actively participating. So if we use the conventional model as a guide, you're basically just the patient listening to what the doctor says and does, and you really have no control, right? You come here, we teach you all these steps, we help educate you on that process, and all of a sudden, you're now an active participant instead of a passive participant. And that creates power, it creates confidence, it creates less anxiety, less stress, knowing that you're actually doing things step by step to help yourself. And I think that means the world. So that's the other reason I spend the time teaching this 4-pillar approach as much as I can, because I see in the patient's eyes, once they start learning it, their shoulders just start to relax and they know they're hitting this from every angle. And I think that's significantly important. Okay, so let me transition into this wellness concept, right? So I want to make sure you'll see up here, it's a slide that's going to outline everything that we put together in this program for you. So the point I'll make is, again, I want to create value to this because I think it's very important. The concept of prevention is much easier than the cure. It's much less expensive, time, energy, money, all of that. So again, 2024, we're making a major push on the preventative side because we're just seeing too much now. And so if we can get ahead and start looking at, these energy tests where we're looking at the systems of the body and we're testing it energetically, we're looking inside the cell, we're testing some of these circulating tumor cells early, because if there's something going on, it's going to start picking it up before a scan will. And let me quickly mention this. Typically a scan, like an MRI or a CAT scan or something like that, may only start to pick it up when there's about a 20% or more change in the tissue. So there has to be somewhat of a significant change in order for some of these scans to pick it up, okay? So we want to use these. Energy is probably the most sensitive test, so we do a lot of bioenergy work, and then blood work, saliva, and urine is another level of sensitivity, and then the scans are probably the least sensitive. So as long as we're looking at all of them and looking at it even when you're well, we can start looking for breakdown before it even becomes a pathological event. And that's the key. The key today is all about prevention and wellness. So the plan that you see on this slide was outlined specifically to make sure we cross T's and dot I's as it relates to early detection and prevention. Okay? So I almost implore you to look into that, again, whether it's here or somewhere else, but we created this plan here because of what we see day in and day out, and I think it's imperative that you at least consider looking into the preventative part of it. Again, we're seeing just too much, so we're getting more and more, I think, focused on the wellness and preventative part. Take a minute because we do get a lot of calls the next day, so I want to make sure that you have the information that you need. So just briefly, there's 3 kind of demographic of patients that we see. We see patients that call in for wellness and prevention. Then we have patients that call in that have active cancer that want care. And then we have patients that call in that want to prevent reoccurrence. Okay, so I want to guide you properly in each of those. If you are a wellness patient and looking for prevention, here's the number to call. Okay, that's Miles is the intake person that will help guide you through the step-by-step process there. Okay, if you're either actively fighting cancer and need support or had recent cancer that you want to prevent reoccurrence, here's the number that you want to call here, and Vicky will help walk you through step-by-step that process, okay? If it's supplements that you want to inquire about, the supplement store, you can call this number here. And then finally, if there's hyperbaric oxygen therapy that you'd like to pursue, here's the number for that. So we have different departments. I just wanted to make sure that I was at least steering you in the right direction and made it easy for you. Okay? So, all right, we'll see you soon.